We're looking at the second deadliest month in Afghanistan because of those IEDs.
The Michael Jackson homicide investigation is now underway after his death was called a homicide by the coroner.
Newly unsealed court papers show his personal doctor, Conrad Murray, gave Jackson the deadly dose of drugs that killed him. What will it take now for prosecutors to decide they do have enough evidence to move forward to say, yes, a crime was committed? Let's go to the MSNBC newsroom with former prosecutor, current defense attorney, David Smith. David, good to see you today.
Thank you for having me.
It seems like you have a smoking gun, so to speak, here. So when do you expect formal charges?
Well, they're going to investigate this case a little bit more thoroughly and decide what charges are the appropriate ones. There are two charges that could come out of this. Ruling this a homicide only simply means that, in fact, a death was committed by the actions of someone else. Now the potential charges are potentially murder in the second degree or involuntary manslaughter. The facts that relate to both of those are very different. Murder in the second degree will require the prosecutors to demonstrate that Dr. Murray, in fact, knew the risk. He knew subjectively that there was a risk that Michael Jackson could die and proceeded nonetheless in the face of that risk with conscious disregard of it. The other alternative, which is involuntary manslaughter, doesn't require anything like that. It requires objectively, if medical professionals would come forward and simply say that by this doctor administering this mix, this toxic cocktail.
But haven't we already seen that? I mean, we've had so many doctors on who say this is ridiculous. You would never use propofol as a sleep aid. You'd never administer it outside of controlled hospital situations, even though it wasn't, it doesn't seem to be illegal to do that.
Well, that's exactly the point for the involuntary manslaughter. I think that that's going to turn out to be a much easier case for them to make because they don't need to get inside of Dr. Murray's head and determine what he knew. All they need to do is look objectively at what he did and compare that with what the medical industry and professionals will say was the right course of action to take. And I, like you, have watched, I've listened, and I haven't heard anyone yet come forward and say that administering propofol in a home setting as well as mixing it with these, I mean, the regimen of other drugs that he gave him that particular evening seems to me to be quite a lot.
Diane Diamond said here on MSNBC, she's someone who has investigated Michael Jackson for years, that having a live-in doctor is like having an in-house drug pusher is really what it's like. I mean, does that fit with conventional wisdom? It seems like the case, unless you have, a life-threatening medical condition. Other than that, seems somewhat logical. David.
Well, look, this is a cardiologist. This isn't even a pain management specialist or an anesthesiologist. It's a cardiologist who apparently was camping out with him for 6 weeks, administering this drug that, from all accounts that I've heard and people I've spoken with, is something that's usually used in a medical setting in a hospital.
Okay, so I have some big questions on this. And David, before I let you go, I want to put them up and see if you can answer any of these.
Sure.
How exactly are they going to find out whether, how was it that Jackson got his hands on the propofol? How involved was Murray in that? Exactly when did Jackson stop breathing? That's another big question that seems to be unanswered. And who else might be implicated? If they're looking at Dr. Conrad Murray, we also know that there were prescriptions here by Dr. Arnie Klein and other medical professionals.
Well, what they're going to have to do is they're going to have to look at the timeline of things. Number one, to identify the actual time of death. But as far as the prescription drugs are concerned, that was the purpose of the search warrants that they executed in various places throughout the country. These drugs are regulated. They can be traced from one place to another. The purchaser can be traced. And that's where they're starting as far as the search warrants are concerned.
All right. Thanks a lot. We appreciate you coming in, David.